So now we're going to move on to part 3. So we've discussed hearing loss, how we graph hearing loss, some different tests that we do to determine speech understanding, and now we're going to move on to communication and how we can communicate better. We're going to talk about your communication style, factors that can influence communication, communication guidelines, and managing your communication environment. So what is your communication style? So it's extremely important that you learn to be an assertive communicator. The first type of communicator is a passive communicator. And this is a common one. These people typically, instead of admitting that they have a hearing loss or admitting that they're having difficulties understanding someone, they isolate themselves, they withdraw, they bluff, they pretend like they hear when they can't. This leads to a lot of frustration and can lead to depression as well. The second type of communication style is aggressive. Basically, this individual just blames everybody else for them not being able to hear or communicate. And again, the ideal communication style is being assertive. So these people are not afraid to disclose that they have hearing loss to whomever they're speaking to and what their communication limitations are. So again, we want you to be assertive. There's 3 things you really need to do to be an assertive communicator. First of all, we want you to be able to admit that you have a hearing problem to others. Number 2, you need to be willing to explain the problem to others when it's appropriate. And then 3, suggest ways to improve that communication. So again, this is an example of hitting on all 3 of these. I'm so sorry. I did not understand what you said because I have a hearing loss. It would help me if you would just speak a little bit slower. So it's a very simple statement that's addressing all 3 of these issues. Now we're going to be talking about factors that can influence conversation or communication. The listener, so the person with the hearing loss, the speaker, the person speaking to you, and then the environment that you're in. So this breaks down the listener, the speaker, and the environment. And all of these are variables that can affect that particular conversation. And I'm just going to hit on a couple or on a few of these. As far as the listener is concerned, what are some variables? The type and degree of hearing loss that you have. If you wear hearing aids or not. Are you motivated to hear? Some people don't really care. Do you have ringing in your ears? What is your speech understanding ability? How confident are you? The speaker, some of the variables there are their voice quality, how quickly they're speaking, if they use facial expressions and mannerisms. Is there facial hair? Are you eating? Is there objects in or around the mouth? And then also environment. Is there background noise? How is the lighting? How are the room acoustics? So these are all variables that can affect that particular conversation. So we're going to talk about listeners. So these are some things that you can do to help yourself. Number 1, pay attention. Number 2, develop good listening skills. This is not something that we're all born with. We have to learn this. Number 3, observe the speaker. Number 4, plan ahead and pick the best spot to communicate. So for example, if you know you're going to be going out to a restaurant, maybe plan to go at an earlier time and have a specific place picked out where you'd like to sit, maybe away from the noise, away from the music, etc. Take breaks if needed. If you're starting to get overwhelmed, if you're starting to get frustrated, take a break. Double check the details. Knowing you have hearing loss, sometimes we miss some of the details, and if there are important details that you need to know, then double check those. And lastly, do not bluff. Do not pretend like you hear something when you don't. And this is where being assertive comes into play. So now we're going to talk about good communication guidelines for speakers, so the people who are talking. So this is good for family members and close friends who spend a lot of time with their friends and family who have hearing loss. Get close to the listener. So typically within 6 feet is the optimal distance. Speak slower and clearly. When you speak slowly, you pretty much automatically will speak clearer. Do not shout. This actually distorts speech and does not help the listener. Rephrase when a listener does not understand what you're saying. So instead of just repeating the same phrase over and over, rephrase it. Also, just be really patient, be relaxed. Use facial expressions and gestures. Don't have anything in and around your mouth, and confirm the details. There's sometimes information that you're reporting to them that they need to know, like an address or a phone number, and confirm that they understood what you said. So clear speech is something that we kind of learn with experience. Most audiologists utilize this every day, and we kind of learn it just from experience. So this is a speech technique that when you state every word along with appropriate duration and spacing, this makes it much less frustrating for the listener. Clear speech can reduce the need for repetition, which helps everyone. It's a win-win situation. You do not need to shout when using clear speech, and you do not need to exaggerate. Clear speech is used with patience and understanding of a difficult listening situation for the listener. Now we're going to talk about the environment, some things that we can do to manage our environment. So move away from background noise if at all possible. If you're going to have a meaningful conversation with someone and it's pretty noisy, maybe move to another room so that you can do this more effectively. Reduce the distance. So remember, 6 feet is your optimal distance, 6 feet or under. Make the most of the lighting. If it's super dark and you're trying to have a meaningful conversation, it's going to be much more difficult to use speech reading, which we all do to some extent. Try to choose places, restaurants, that type of thing, where the environment has less echo and less reverberation. So this is going to be places that have more carpet, curtains, wall coverings, which absorbs a lot of that reverberation. Avoid places with live music if you want to have a meaningful conversation. Live music is fun and go for it if you want to, but just make the other person aware that this is not going to be an ideal situation to have a meaningful conversation. So a lot of times people who go out to eat, they choose to meet and eat during non-peak hours, which are typically a lot quieter, and this really works well for a lot of people. Pick your seat so that you're nearest the person or people that you know that you're going to talk to the most. And if you're going out to eat or to a restaurant, requesting a booth instead of a table is extremely helpful. It blocks background noise more and it contains the conversation more effectively.